10 years ago. My dear, that hat. 10 years must be a long time. And yet this speedy fashion show features the smartest Paris offerings for 1923. Our first mannequin says, "You're never too young to be stylish." Can you realize it? That baby of yesterday will be a debutante tomorrow. And look, daring, sophisticated. My, where will those Paris designers ever stop? Well, it was a show of startling styles, and now the out-of-town buyers meet the models at a bumper banquet. They may even talk business, or they may not. Canada was at home to some famous visitors in 1923. Let's glance at their calling cards. Sir Robert and Lady Baden-Powell, respectively Chief Scout and Chief Girl Guide of the world. Their good turn for this particular day was reviewing scouts and guides at Victoria, BC. By now, perhaps many of these young Victorians may have children of their own. And Baron Renfrew, he looks uncommonly like the Smiling Prince, and so he is, for the Prince traveled incognito that year to ensure arrest. Mr. and Mrs. George McManus, of course they're Jiggs and Maggie, or rather, George McManus is the man who draws them. They were just taking time off from a survey of corned beef and cabbage conditions in Toronto. They found ice boating a speedy sport, speedier than Jig's sprint when he's trying to slip around the corner to Dinty Moors. Rudolph Valentino, the most popular screen actor of all time, visited Canada with his bride, formerly Winifred Hudnut. 3 years later, thousands rioted in New York for a glimpse of Valentino in his coffin. David Lloyd George was welcomed to Montreal by Mayor Médéric Martin. The fiery little Welshman and Sir Arthur Currie got up a foursome. Watch Britain's wartime premier as he drives and puts. Not even the strain of steering the ship of state to victory could put him off his stroke. What a crush greeted him in Toronto. What celebrity could attract a mob like that today? The Welsh Wizard's magic heartened these veterans, some of whom, 10 years later, are still in these very beds, remembering his daughter Megan's cheery smile. Away back in 23, the Montreal Winter Sports Carnival featured a startling contest and called on Canada to send her fairest daughters to compete for the title of Miss Canada. From all over the Dominion, they arrived in Montreal. Beauties in up-to-the-minute winter outfits that were every woman's despair. The choice finally narrowed down to 9. Can you pick the winner? Or perhaps you still remember who she was. But 10 years is a long time to remember. The points for judging were general appearance, personality, deportment, and aptitude for sports. So let's look them over through our 10-year telescope. Is it Miss Halifax? Or perhaps your eye stops at Miss Edmonton, and certainly you'll give high marks to Miss Regina. And then there's Miss Winnipeg, and finally Miss St. John, and she's the winner. Miss St. John becomes Miss Canada. A tantalizing little typist becomes a queen. She's Winifred Blair of St. John, New Brunswick, 19-year-old daughter of a disabled war veteran. Watch her take off into the future as she wonders what it may hold for her. Away the other side of the years, we know the answer. Miss Canada today is Mrs. J. Harold Drummy, wife of a prominent young lawyer of St. John. And this is their son, Tommy, age 2½. 10 years may be a long, long time, but not to Mrs. Drummy, for she's still the captivating Miss Canada of that contest back in '23. The time machine now whisks us back again to meet Baron Byng of Vimy in 1923. It's at St. John, too, and Baron Byng, as Governor General of Canada, has come to open the largest dry dock in the world at Courtney Bay. This huge dock is 42 feet deep and 1,225 feet long. It can take 2 ships at a time. And a decade later, it's still one of the world's wonders. Here's a choice relic from the cobwebs of '23. According to this, black eyes must have been very fashionable then, and frostbite, and pneumonia. The idea is to hit each other, the referee, or the ice. You may win on points, but sooner or later the ice will get the decision by a knockout. Do you remember this young lady? 10 long years ago, Doris Elizabeth Hyde of Toronto was chosen from the youngsters of the whole Dominion as Canada's loveliest child. Here she is with Colonel Cockshott, and again with her proud father and mother. At a big party given in her honor in Government House, little Doris Elizabeth reigns as unself-consciously as any princess. A portrait of Doris was painted by Joshua Smith, R.B.A., and a miniature of it was presented to Her Majesty Queen Mary to hang in her famous doll's house at Windsor Castle. A rose from the garden of Canadian childhood. Since then, a whole decade has rolled by. Through the mists of time, we return to 1933. A new Doris Elizabeth greets us this side of the years, still lovely, but a child no more.
Doris! You're Doris Elizabeth Hyde, aren't you?
Yes, I am.
I'm baby Rosemarie.
Oh, yes, I've often heard you on the radio and seen you in the movies, too.
Yes, and I've heard a lot about Canada's loveliest child. Gee, but it's awful to be famous so young, isn't it?
Let's sit down and talk about it.
All right. How old are you?
I'm just 14.
Gee, you're way ahead of me. I was born the year you were chosen Canada's loveliest child. Can you remember those days?
Well, it's a bit hazy. I was only 4 years old then. And after all, 10 years is a long, long time ago.